The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Welcome, everybody. It is Need to Know, another week, and a lot more you need to know. A lot has happened in this crazy planet we call Earth in the last couple of days since we visited with you last Monday. I want to start off talking about something that we developed as a theme several weeks ago, and I'm sure you'll recall if you're a regular listener to the program. If you missed it, I'll give you a quick refresher course. I talked about what's happening in the Middle East. I've had a lot of strong opinions on that. I do a lot of reading and personal analysis. I do not parrot what I hear on television or see in the headlines. I think anybody who listens to Need to Know is fully understanding now that the goal of this program is to encourage you to do your own reading, your own research, and most of all, your own thinking with your logical mind and your common sense. Don't buy the banana that's thrown your way. Don't be influenced by others. Don't draw conclusions based on a headline or a soundbite. If you're interested in a subject, find out everything you can about that, but just basically rely on your own good judgment and your own experience and your own intellect and again, those two words that are such a lost art in our society, common sense. Work it out, making it be understandable. I for people that have not listened to the show, my first kind of aha moment with common sense came many years ago. A lot of you younger listeners probably are not familiar with the story, or if you are, you don't know the details. But there were two major U.S. Olympic figure skaters by the name of Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan, who Kerrigan had surged ahead of Harding as the top prospect for a gold medal from the United States. And just a month before the Olympics, coming off the ice at a practice session, and if you've ever been to a public skating rink, you have seen this many times, where there will be like a corner of the ice that is kind of coned off, and they're allowing certain figure skating performers the opportunity to kind of work on their craft. Well, in the case of Kerrigan, she was of course being allowed to use the ice surface exclusively during that hour for her practice session, and it's not like there's a lot of people around when that's going on. That was not even a public session at whatever rink that was, and I forgot where the venue was in terms of what city. But as she came off the ice, and she was not surrounded by security, probably just her coach and maybe some other persons that were associated with her, either personally or family. She came off the ice, and this gigantic guy emerged from the shadows with a tire tool and cranked her as hard as he could, like a baseball bat, right in the knee. And clearly an attempt to injure her, and then fled the premises while she grimaced in pain. It turned out she had a damage to her kneecap from the blow, and it put her Olympic status in great jeopardy. She did end up gutting it out 5 or 6 weeks later with the injury, but clearly wasn't the same. It really handed the gold medal to another country. But Tanya Harding, the other American, I think she may have gotten a bronze medal, or maybe she got nothing. But the bottom line is it didn't benefit anybody. But that night, that very night, when everybody was, it was just a huge story, and everybody was saying, well, what happened there? Who would attack Kerrigan? what would be the motivation? And I told my wife, Kathy, at the time, well, there's only one possible explanation. And it was crystal clear to me. Tanya Harding was kind of a hard scrabble, lower middle class, not the typical silver spoon kind of, figure skating icon that comes along that's had lessons paid for since she had been born and had been groomed basically for those moments. Tanya Harding was just kind of just kind of a second class citizen in the scheme of things in terms of her background. She was real basic, not very polished, and it was pretty clear to me that the only person that had any incentive for being responsible for that, there's nothing else that made sense. And nobody was speculating at the time. This is the very first day. But I told my wife that night, well, you just watch. Tanya Harding has something to do with this because there's nobody else that would benefit from it. And my wife at the time said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. She wouldn't do anything that stupid." And I said, "Well, she didn't do it, but I guarantee you it was done on her behalf or on her behest." So, of course, the story unraveled quickly. They identified the guy, Shane, somebody who was just a thug, a friend of a guy named Jeff Galooly, who was Tanya Harding's boyfriend, and he was a convicted criminal, just a real scumbag of a low level operator, wannabe kind of mobster guy, just a complete piece of garbage. And that was her boyfriend, and this was his friend that did this. It all unraveled within a couple of weeks, and Tanya Harding to this day says she knew nothing about this, that this was done by her boyfriend to try to benefit her. But she did say the night, and this is just disgusting, but the night that the news broke and that Nancy Kerrigan had been attacked, Tanya Harding, in her biography or autobiography or whatever it was, wrote that she and Jeff just made the most passionate, intense love that they had ever made that night because there was just so much energy. I mean, she basically admitted it because, again, she is not the sharpest tool in the shed, let's put it that way, of how they celebrated the misfortune of Nancy Kerrigan that night. And, it really was something to me from the first moment that was so obvious that nobody was speculating. Everybody was wondering why this random attack on this, heroic, Olympian. And it made perfect sense because they came up with the plot that we're going to clear Kerrigan out of the way by making her unable to compete, which should favor Tanya's opportunity to perhaps win a gold medal and get all the endorsements and all the attention. The plot soon unraveled. So that's kind of the background of how you can look at a situation. And even if something seems like it's unlikely, if all evidence from a common sense standpoint points to that, it's a good way to sort of make your own mind work. I mean, ask yourself right away who benefits, follow the money, follow all the motivations, and usually it's not that hard to unravel these kind of things. With that preface of how I kind of had that moment of understanding the power of my own mind through information and analysis and common sense, this whole Middle East situation is something that is so crystal clear to me that it amazes me that so many people completely misunderstand it, misread it, do not know the history of how we've gotten to this point. There's so much information that you need to know. We started talking about this in earnest, of course, when the campus protests broke out at the end of last college semester back in the spring. All of these people creating these tent cities on campuses, in some cases occupying buildings, chanting and ranting and raving about the Israelis indiscriminate destruction of Gaza, and demanding a ceasefire, and demanding that the poor, long-suffering Palestinian people shouldn't be subjected to the Israeli military invading their land. Some even said incorrectly their nation. There's no nation of Palestine. It's Gaza. It is a region that the Israelis technically, have possession of after the 1967 war with Egypt. And because of the Palestinian problem, because that Israel, the land that is currently modern day Israel, the nation, has been passed along throughout the centuries to all kinds of different civilizations. Every conquering empire has occupied that turf, and it's just this amalgam, this kind of hodgepodge of different backgrounds. There certainly are sacred areas. The city, of course, of Jerusalem is held dear by Muslims, by Christians, and by Jews, as the origin place for a lot of their religions and their religious beliefs. So basically, Jerusalem is the big chip in the game, so to speak, that everybody is always jockeying for control of. And the fact of the matter is that for many centuries, these people lived in, I won't say peace, but all of these different cultures just kind of made it work until 1948, after the World War II, and after the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were killed, exterminated by predominantly Nazi Germany. There needed to be a place for European Jews to go, since they had had everything destroyed, and Israel was established as a Jewish nation, predominantly by the British with American support. And it has caused a powder keg ever since, because Palestinians were displaced after the 1967 war. Many of them were given the opportunity to settle in Gaza, which again should be technically Israel territory now. But this has been going on even since the Crusades, back in the early days of civilization, the Muslim against Christian struggle, and the Jews kind of in an also ran position, watching all that sort out. Well, the establishment of Israel as a Hebrew state really kind of added another player to that volatile mix that continues to be a complete just roller coaster, unstable, shaky situation for all these decades. So on October 7th of last year, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of that, a squadron of Hamas invaders, Hamas, of course, a terrorist organization recognized worldwide as such, who had managed the poor Palestinian people, actually elected a lot of Hamas people, because the resentment toward Israel is not just limited to the empire of Iran, who funds and has established Hamas as a terrorist organization dedicated to one principle and one principle only, and that principle is the destruction and elimination of the state of Israel. When you hear from the river to the sea, that means from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean, of basically driving all the Israelis out into the sea, aka eliminating these people's existence. And on October 7th, a year ago, they took a big step in that direction, sending a hit squad of a bunch of trained killers into neighborhoods and events. A concert was a real bloodbath, and they just savagely, without any humanity whatsoever, murdered almost 1,400 people, many including children, old people, women, and little girls were savagely raped. Babies were burned alive. Old people were tortured. This is the most horrific thing, maybe since the days where barbarians would at that time was called sack towns and civilizations, just going with these barbaric tactics. It was unprecedented, and there was immediate, worldwide condemnation. Our own president, they woke Joe Biden up long enough to board Air Force One so he could sleep on the 14-hour flight over to Israel. And he, the next day or 2 days after that horrific attack, was actually on the ground in Israel, assuring the Israelis that we had their back and we were going to be right in the middle of taking good care of them, and we are their ally, and we'll do anything to ensure their existence going forward. Well, that didn't play very well with the ridiculous radical left wing of the Democrat Party, who has been pulling the strings pretty much throughout this whole process. Biden was hit with a backlash of outrage from those people who are actually defending this horrible barbaric attack. And in some cases, if you ask protesters, denying that it even happened. They're saying this is just Israel making this up to give them the excuse to go into Gaza and just indiscriminately murder thousands and thousands of Palestinians. Now, these same Palestinians, these innocent civilians, as they're called, have elected Hamas over and over. And I know that probably is tainted because once an organization, an extremist organization gets power, elections become a joke, of course. We're starting to see that in our own country. But the bottom line is, all of a sudden, the administration policy changed. And as Israel moved into Gaza to hunt down the leaders of Hamas and eliminate all of the Hamas organization, which again is they have no choice. This group who right on the border, who has been responsible for missile attacks and now they sent people into Israel specifically to kill innocents. This is a battle for your existence. Either Hamas has to go or the Israelis are going to go. You can't have your most vehement foe right poised on your own border with the instant access of murdering your citizens. We're arguably going in that direction here in America by allowing these gigantic Mexican cartels who every year enrich themselves by billions and billions of dollars because of our lax policies, which are on purpose, by the way. It's not incompetence. It is incompetence and ineptitude, but it's largely the agenda of this administration. And guess who's getting rich and more powerful and more militaristic? It's the Mexican cartels. Well, we might have this nightmare on our plate in just 8 or 10 years that Israel has been facing for decades. So Hamas has to go or Israel's going to go. And the problem is there's going to be civilian casualties because Hamas doesn't care about the Palestinian people, the innocent citizens. They set up all of their operations in tunnels under hospitals, in schools, in neighborhoods. They might have, there might be a hovel that's housing a family or multiple families of innocent Palestinians, but the houses on either side are occupied by Hamas. And there was a report this week that one of the other terrorist organizations in Lebanon, Hezbollah, launched a cruise missile from inside or on the property of a residential home. So these people are living in plain sight amongst civilians because they think that's an insurance card that the direct attacks are going to be able to be completely criticized and condemned if there's civilian casualties. Well, that's why they're spread right in. They don't have military bases. These people are operating and putting the citizens, the poor innocent citizens, Palestinians, in harm's way because they don't care about them. They're just collateral damage that then they can say through the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is the most ridiculous name for a propaganda organization ever. And you hear news people. I think I told you 6 or 7 months ago, I still had it on a local channel after a ball game. And the lead story, the weekend chick that was doing the news, 20-something-year-old that obviously has a ton of world experience, is reading a teleprompter and saying, about Israel attacking a hospital in Gaza, over 200 killed, including doctors and patients. That turned out to be total bullshit. And they're reading this off the screen, quoting the Gaza Ministry of Defense. That turned out to be, and it's documented now, the hospital was not struck. The missile did not come from Israel. It came from another terrorist organization within the borders of the Gaza Strip, trying to launch one of the hundreds of missiles that Israel deals with from these lunatics every single day. And it was misguided, or maybe it wasn't, but it landed in a parking lot adjacent to the hospital. There were 6 people on the ground that unfortunately were killed, but the whole thing was total BS. And here it gets into our system, and our local news people read it, and our radical commentators on the far left networks recite it like it's gospel. It is a big fat lie. Every time there's citizen casualties, there might be 10, there might be 12, and all those are terrible if they are truly non-combatants. Of course, they are forewarned to get the hell out of there, because that's going to be a military operation area as Israel tries to hunt down all the Hamas terrorists. But the bottom line is they don't go anywhere. And when they're casualties, it might be 10 or 12. And all of a sudden, the Ministry of Health for Gaza, which is the Hamas propaganda bureau, declares that there's been 130 casualties today, and they show some kind of alleged film clip from there, and they put it on TikTok, and they put it on all these radical networks, and everybody says, and they brainwash people into thinking that Israel is just this cruel, terrible, bloodthirsty country that wants to slaughter innocent citizens, and it's absolute garbage. So with all that being said, I told you when all the news media for weeks were saying that there's going to be a major escalation in the Middle East because the Israelis had the gall to somehow rig a guest house that is reserved for the Hamas leader, who lives, by the way, in lavish luxury in Qatar. These guys are billionaires because they've been siphoning all the money out of Gaza while the poor, innocent citizens starve and lead terrible lives, not educated, brainwashed. Incest is rampant. There's many circumstances where 70-year-old men are married to preteen girls. It's really a cesspool of depravity and disgusting, complete, just letting the situation get out of control, while these guys that are calling the shots for Hamas live in luxury. Well, one of those, Hami, went to the inauguration of the Iranian president, and there was a nasty little surprise in his military base guest house, because somehow the Israelis had infiltrated that area, and when they knew he was back on board in that house guesting in Tehran, they blew him to smithereens. And it really hit home, I think, with the Iranian officials that, geez, the Mossad is nothing, not an organization within Israel to mess with. And people kept saying, well, Iran's going to strike back. Iran's going to retaliate. And I told you on this show and in all my writings for weeks, no, they're not, because they know what happens if they do that. If they hit or try to hit Israel with any kind of attack, they're going to get annihilated, because Israel is so far ahead of these primitive, extremist, crazy lunatics in all their tactics, their counterintelligence, their military capability. It's a mismatch. That's why you've got Iran funding a couple of terrorist organizations, Hezbollah now, the one who is in the news this week, and that's the main reason I wanted to talk to you. If you're not aware of how they pulled this off, Hezbollah has been a pain in the ass for Israel on the Lebanon border for the last 20 years. Once again, completely funded by the Iranians. And by the time the Trump administration had ended in 2020, the Iranians had been bled pretty much dry in terms of their financial ability to support themselves, let alone their proxy terrorist organizations. Of course, Iran's stated goal is death to Israel, death to America. And yet this administration, the Biden-Harris administration, you know, that Harris, the one who's actually running for president, despite for 3.5 years, and all the things she's going to do on day one. Kamala, this is day 1341 of you being in the current administration. She's going to be an agent for change. Kamala, agent for change in an administration that you have been a part of the entire time for 3.5 years. She's running against her own administration, their own record. She's going to do all these wonderful things for all of you that she has done nothing except for facilitate the misery by letting 12 or 14 million illegals into the country, by being a part of the ridiculous runaway inflation that we've all had to endure. But Bidenomics is working. How many times have we heard Kamala declare, Bidenomics is working? We are so proud of what we're accomplishing through Bidenomics. What a stinking joke. But back to the Middle East. So the imminent attack, the imminent retaliation, and all of our State Department swings into action right away and goes, well, we are going to redouble our efforts. We've got to stop. This is going to escalate into a world conflict. This is going to be terrible. And they started using words like, we need to de-escalate. We need to negotiate. We need to make a deal. I told you a couple of weeks ago, if you fall into a rattlesnake pit, you don't make a deal. You have to fight back or die, and that's basically the position that these people have put the Western allies and Israel in. You don't negotiate with terrorists. That was always the rule. That still needs to be the rule because they don't seek a negotiation. Hezbollah said this week, after Israel pulled off one of the most ingenious attacks ever, and I am going to get to that here as I wrap things up, but the bottom line is they say until Israel stops attacking Gaza, Hezbollah is going to continue their assault of hundreds of missiles a day. And remember, just a month or so ago, one of those missiles hit a soccer field on a Saturday afternoon, dead center in the middle of the field, and killed 14 teenagers playing soccer and injured a ton of people that were there as spectators. That's the kind of crap that's going on, and they vowed they're going to continue this until the attack of Gaza ends. But it's not going to end if Israel pulled out tomorrow and gave all the concessions, returned all the prisoners that Hamas is demanding, which is at the root of this, because not only did they kill 1,400 Israelis, they took 300 or 400 hostages, 150 that are still unaccounted for. We just found out last week that 6 of them were executed when Israel was closing in on their location of where they were hiding them. But there's so many elements to this. But the Israelis pulled off the most audacious thing last week, somehow in interrupting the supply line. Hezbollah had gotten away from using mobile phones because the Israelis were so sophisticated in all of their tactics. They had hacked all of these Hezbollah communications and knew 2 steps ahead what these idiots were going to do. So they went back to ancient technology, basically, in the scheme of things. Now they ordered about 5,000 pagers from a company in Taiwan who says they handed that project off to another technical company based in Hungary. And somewhere along the line, Israel was able to insert themselves into the supply line of parts. And the battery process, Israel was able, while there's a lot of protocol There's got to be a lot of third parties involved in shipping anything to these heavily sanctioned organizations that the Western world supposedly doesn't let anybody support. But when in that process, Israel was able to get hold of those devices and load them with explosives, including tiny pieces of metal inside the pagers. And last Tuesday at a 3:30 local time in Lebanon, about 3,000 of those devices ignited. And the people who had gotten a message were pulling the pagers up to their face to read the message, and they exploded right in their hand. Or if they were in their pocket still or on their belt, it did severe damage to some other parts. Let's just say that I heard one comedian say, these guys are motivated by the fact that ancient Islam teaches that, if you die gloriously for the cause, there are 72 virgins awaiting you. Well, these explosions probably resulted in a miserable experience, if that's true, because they're going to arrive with nothing to facilitate that great gift from the heavenly sources. Anyway, I'm off track. The way the Israelis infiltrated that and executed that plot is just another psychological message, just like when Donald Trump once sent a photograph of the Grand Ayatollah's private house quarters just to send the message that, okay, we got Soleimani, your number one terrorist, military, purveyor of all the world's problems, and we can get you too. And believe me, these people know the sophistication that they're up against, and they are not as even remotely as sophisticated. They're just a bunch of savages, and they have bit off more than they can chew here and are just trying to hang on. And if they manage to get a ceasefire and a de-escalation, all of the things that our own State Department to once again cater to the left, if they do manage to get that done, they survive, and their survival continues the problem, because as long as that fuse is lit, we're going to have instability and problems in the Middle East. The Trump administration had basically completely stomped out ISIS and was certainly on the verge of doing the same with Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, all funded by Iran. But this administration has gone ahead and made billions of dollars available to the Iranians. Why? It is the greatest mystery of all time that the radical branch of the Democrat Party, the leftist branch, is such big fans of the Iranians and think that's the key to Middle East stability. It is obviously not. Iran is in league with China and Russia, one of our leading global foes, and we need to approach it that way and stop trying to make deals, negotiate settlements, because this powder keg is never going to be defused until these organizations are wiped out. That's what you need to know this week. I hope I had some facts that you weren't aware of. Do your own thinking, apply your own intellect and common sense, and we will visit with you again next week. Don't forget, Bidenomics is working. When you go to Wendy's today for lunch and it's $30 for a hamburger, fries, and a cold drink, remind yourself how well Bidenomics is working. And from day one, I'm going to lower prices on day 1301 in the administration that drove prices through the roof. I'm Kip Kiefer. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next time on Need to Know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.